Hello, everybody, and welcome to another wonderful episode of The Best Games Period. I'm your host, Jack Gardner, and with me this week are JJ and Matt, both from MidBoss Studios, and GaymerX. You guys do a lot of different things, actually.
We try to stay busy.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me, guys.
Of course. Yeah, we're super happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
And for people who have never listened before, this is the Best Games Period, where we discuss and argue and sometimes just agree on what the best games period might be. What belongs in the Video Game Hall of Fame, or if you want to be kind of pretentious about it, video game canon. And this week, JJ and Matt, you both nominated a lesser-known horror game called Illbleed for the Dreamcast. However, before we get into that, do you guys want to talk a little bit more about the projects you have going on, the things you work on? Because again, like I mentioned, you do a lot.
Sure. So JJ is the director. So we do a couple different things. So at MidBoss, we have our first game that came out earlier this year called 2064 Read-Only Memories that JJ here directed. But we also run GaymerX, which is an LGBT-focused gaming event and also a nonprofit, and we focus on, trying to help out and, give visibility to queer developers, and we have talks and events. We're now just about to run our 9th event in New York City, GaymerX East 2017. That's going to be early November 4th and 5th, and in downtown Manhattan. But we've done events in Australia, in San Francisco, and different kind of community events. And, we just try to kind of put our hands in however we can help out the LGBT and surrounding communities in the gaming world. And, that's super fun, but it's kind of fun, mixing that with our game development stuff as well.
Yeah. So JJ, you actually directed 2064 Read-Only Memories. And I find it interesting that you both nominated Illbleed. Because if you look into kind of the history of Illbleed, it was not necessarily the most well-received game of its time, released in 2001 for the Dreamcast. What exactly makes that game so special?
I think, at least as far as... So, we both played it at the same time, and we kind of switched off with each other playing it. And I think originally we went with another game that we were thinking about talking about on here, but Illbleed kind of resonated with us, I think, the most and was the most fresh in our head. As far as, horror games go, not many horror games want to be, a grindhouse kind of horror, and I feel like Illbleed, as flawed as it may seem, whenever it came out, it seemed to really have a lot of heart in it in terms of the mood and the style it was trying to set. It didn't want to be a very serious, scary game. It wanted to be gory. It wanted to be goofy. It wanted to be campy. It wanted to be a grindhouse game, and I think it represented that really well with its characters and its music, and it gets really bizarre later on in the game, just very bizarre.
Oh, yeah. It really does. Is that why you nominated it as well, Matt?
I think that, you mentioned how the reviews for it weren't great when it came out. But, I think that, it depends on how you look at it as a game. I think if you look at it from a pure gameplay standpoint, it definitely is not the strongest game, even comparatively to Resident Evil Code Veronica, which came out around the same time. But in terms of the vision and the creativity that went into it, it's very, very rare that you see a game nowadays, especially with how expensive and time consuming it is to make a game. You see a lot of times game developers, when they're working on a non-indie project, they usually take the safest route. And with Illbleed, it felt like they never took the safe route. They always kept doing, and as they got further and further into the game development, they just got weirder and weirder. and more bizarre. And, you know, I really appreciate when people are able to just be like, here's my vision and I'm just going to go for it. And I don't really care if it makes money. I don't care if it's any good. Like, I have an idea in my mind and I'm going to, you know, see it through to the end. And I feel like that's what we got with Illbleed, is a true vision from someone. And it's definitely unique and weird. And it's very unlike anything else that's ever existed.
That might be an understatement somehow. Do either of you want to take a stab at trying to explain to people who might not have ever heard of Illbleed before, which I'm going to probably go out on a limb and say the majority of our listeners probably have never even heard of Illbleed. What is it?
So, you play as a young lady named Eriko Christy. And basically, you and your group of friends get invited to this House of Horrors thing called Illbleed. And basically, there's an invitation that says, "Hey, you know, if you can make it through this House of Horrors, if you can make it out through all the way to the end, you'll get like $100 million or whatever." And so these young, you know, high school, like very kind of stereotypical, you know, high school kids, they go to Illbleed to experience it and see if they can make it through. And it starts off relatively normal in that, you know, like, it's a horror game. You have to go and you find this thing called a horror scope, which allows you to detect traps. And basically the entire game is you're going through carefully through the world, trying to detect traps. And whenever you don't detect a trap and it goes off on you, and it's pretty often, there's traps everywhere, you know, a scene will play, something will spook you or maybe will hurt you. And depending on if it spooks you or hurts you, your heart rate will either go up or your health will go down. And if your heart rate gets too high, your heart will explode. Or if your health gets too low, you'll die. I think there's also like an adrenaline meter as well that will also, like, if it gets too high, you'll panic and like freak out. So a lot of it is, you know, is being very careful, you know, trying to avoid traps. And then, you know, if you activate the wrong trap or whatever, that you activate like a battle, you either have to choose if you want to try to battle the monster or every battle has like an escape pad where if you like stand on it, you can like call a helicopter that will carry you out to safety.
Yeah.
It's very bizarre, but it works. It's not the best gameplay, but it's maybe that's not even true. I mean, it's fun. It's very fun. But, yeah. I mean, it certainly is not the like. It's kind of clunky. It kind of has Resident Evil kind of controls in terms of it being kind of tank.
I mean, the thing is too is like you can't really look at it so much as like a game that just came out today. This is a game that came out in the early 2000s for the Dreamcast, and even if you go back to like Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2, everybody praised those games whenever they first came out, but whenever you play them today, they kind of feel like crap, to be honest.
Yeah.
And whenever going into this, I mean, it definitely did not age well. But I think that as far as the game mechanics go for that time, they were still pretty strong for the most part. And yeah, throughout the game you play as Matt said, Eriko Christy, but also you can play as three other characters, Kevin, Michael, and Randy, in different situations. Don't they, if they died, do they come back or not? I forget.
You can bring them back. There's
like
a resurrection station with a doctor that has a bunch of coffins behind him, which that's what I look for in a doctor, personally.
Yeah. But the game kind of has like a central hub world at this amusement park, and you can choose these different sections of the amusement park that you want to go to, and they all have like their own kind of campy looking poster and everything on it. And yeah, for the most part, you're just trying to get through those areas without getting a heart attack from being spooked by too many things, which you can avoid by using the what was it called again, Matt?
The horror monitor?
The horror monitor, or not being murdered by like living dolls, X people, what is it? Worms, giant man-eating worms.
And it has most like it has like the weirdest, like bizarrest soundtrack in the world, where it just sounds like weird robot farts the entire time.
Yep.
But it works.
Yeah, I also like the fact that, so like Matt explains, in battles and stuff, you can choose to run away, and how you run away is by calling a helicopter, and you have limited amounts of that. But I liked the fact that no matter where you were, even if you were inside a house, a helicopter ladder would like descend upon you. And it's not just enough that you have to grab the helicopter ladder, you have to like climb up it and survive climbing up before you can like escape.
I like how matter-of-factly you guys just laid out all of the central mechanics for this game, because if you're going into Illbleed completely blind, there's not a whole lot that's explained to you. Like, you would have to have the manual, and even if you have the manual, a lot of this stuff is pretty not intuitive. Like, you have a meter at the top of the screen that, you know, denotes a bunch of the different human senses: sight, smell, hearing, sixth sense, and you have to pay attention to that to kind of guess where the traps are or where an enemy might be. And if you manage to notice the trap, it diffuses it, and if you don't notice it, then you get scared or hurt or whatever. But it's also completely possible to not have the horror monitor. Like, you have to find it at the beginning of each one of these levels. So it's very possible for you to just miss it and die horribly.
Yeah, no, the first time I played it, you know, I went in blind, and I went right to the first level, and I couldn't find the horror monitor. I didn't know I had to find it, so I went right into the house. Mm-hmm. And just everything was scaring me, and I couldn't, like, defuse, you know, you can't detect any traps or anything. And I was like, this game is impossible, I can't figure this out. And then, yeah, you know, even once you find the horror monitor, it's never explained how to use it, or, like, there's no tutorial or anything.
No.
But, it starts off relatively normal, in that you go to this, like, haunted house, and you go through it, and, there's some really bizarre story about, like, a baseball bat boy or something in the first chapter. But it's not too weird. I mean, it is weird. I don't remember actually. I remember being really weird about, like, I don't even know. But, you know, like, as the game progresses, the plots of these, like, you go into these, like, different chapters. They're sort of like self-contained horror movies in a way.
Yeah.
They start getting weirder and weirder. Where, you know, again, the first one's like a haunted house, but, like, later on you're, I don't even know, one is, there's, like, all these, like, wooden dolls, and you gotta, like, become a, like, doll, and there's all these axe cutters and stuff, and you're, like, running around like one of those, like, art school, like, mannequin things.
Yeah. For me, I think this game kind of takes off in an interesting direction when you realize it's taking advantage of the fact that it's all taking place within a theme park. And that's basically at the end of the first level. You've been going through, like, this haunted house, and all of a sudden, the spirit of this vengeful burn victim father who, you know, wants to get his revenge suddenly becomes this 50-foot tall zombie monster, and you're running away from him. And you stumble across a control room, and you find a guy in the control room that's controlling the giant zombie monster trying to kill you. And you just murder him, and he's a robot for some reason. It's great.
Yeah, everybody's a robot or a weird doll. The dolls were pretty strangely gruesome, too, because it was like, they're all made of wood, and you go through a machine, and apparently the only thing that stays intact is your brain somehow. So these dolls have, like, a meaty brain in them. Also, apparently, like, every character has different stats. I liked that I'm looking through some of them, and Michelle Waters, it states that she's psychic, but like there's nothing in the game that really does anything for that.
I think she has more adrenaline points to like detect traps than the other characters. I think that's her.
Yeah, maybe that's because she's psychic now she can like mentally handle, I guess, the horrors that are in the game.
Something like that.
And also, like, what a weird amusement park to the haunted house is like a given, and like the toy area is sort of a given, but there's also like a grocery store. Like, what kind of amusement park is like, here's our amusement, a grocery store, a haunted grocery store. That's it. Which I guess is fun.
I think pretty much every level is a riff off of some movie. Like, the first level, or movie or game. Like, the first level, the haunted house, clearly kind of a reference to Resident Evil. But then you have the worm level that is like Tremors.
Yeah, it's a little bit like Tremors.
Like that, you're running around in the woods, and there are these worms that pop up if you're on like dirt, and that whole level revolves around like getting stuff to fight a giant worm baby that this guy raised as his own child.
Right.
Oh yeah. And whenever you kill it, I think you can see the worm's little spirit. Yes. and the visage of the man, like, happily together finally.
Yeah, they're happy that they're together in hell. Like, that's...
Yeah, in hell. They're in hell. Yeah, that was good.
And so, yes, you go through the different stories, and, like, you know, the one is the home run of death, and the weird worm boy thing. And, you know, and it gets weirder and weirder, and you kind of learn more about, like, the plot is very Cabin in the Woods, where, you know, it's basically, you know, it's a manufactured thing, where, you know, all the scares are all, like, it isn't real, but it is real, but it's like...
I think at one point one of the characters mentions that, like, 100 people die in this park per day. It's like an offhanded remark.
Yeah, it's a very bizarre world, like, that they live in, and it doesn't really make any sense, but it's kind of great. But then, you know, as you go through, the stories get weirder and weirder until you get to one where you play as basically Woody from Toy Story, and it is the most bizarre. Like, that chapter is like the best chapter of any game ever made ever. And that's why I chose, you know, Illbleed, because you play as Woody from Toy Story, and this weird, disgusting child, like, I don't know I don't even know exactly what happens, but this kid, like, dies or something, but before he, like, I guess he, like, kisses you or something, and he's like, I love you, Cork. And then he dies, and then they, like, put you in the coffin with him for some reason.
Oh, yeah. So basically, like, the story of that world is he plays Cork, who's Woody.
I love him.
And he's the toy of this child who is dying. And
the kid is so creepy looking.
It's terrifying. Yeah. The kid is, like, probably one of the more legitimately terrifying looking things in the game. But also,
you're toy size, so he's huge.
Yeah, he's huge, and you get to see his weird low poly Dreamcast face, and
but he has like a weird like puffy face, like he's like full of saline.
Yeah, he's got a puffy face. But it's also probably one of the more disturbing stories in the game too, because this kid is dying. They show him falling back into a coffin and then going to hell. So, like, the entire point of this story is that you are going after your owner. You're going to hell.
No, you're not going after the owner. That's one of the best parts about the story.
Oh, yeah, you're going after
Sexy Doll.
Yeah, Sexy Doll.
Because Woody wants to bone his sexy girlfriend.
Sexy girlfriend is just like a weird, like, stuck in place, like, figurine of like a girl like bent over.
Yeah, and like their butt is huge, and they're only wearing a bikini and a thong, and like they're bent over, and it's Sexy Doll. And anytime you see Sexy Doll, you never see Sexy Doll really from the front. You always see just like their butt completely in your face. But this journey does take you down to hell, where you eventually find, I guess, the coffin of the dead child, but also fight.
So, I literally just refreshed myself on this. This chapter is so bizarre. Like, what happens is Woody goes off, or Cork goes off on this adventure. He gets arrested by the toy police and sent to, like, the toy version of Alcatraz, where he's sentenced to death. And the in-universe equivalent of Buzz Lightyear basically
he's just a ship. He's just a rocket ship robot instead of like a pilot.
Tells him that in order to get to hell to rescue Sexy Doll, he needs to get executed. So he's just all gung-ho about getting executed and hung. And then Buzz Lightyear rescues Cork and is like, oh, I got it wrong. Actually, you would have gone to actual hell. You need to go to toy hell. So in order to do that, we need to get you into the possession of another child and have him die and have you put in his coffin.
That's right. Yeah.
And so you murder a child.
Yeah.
You literally murder a child.
You poison the child. And then you, I guess you jump into the coffin with him and ride down to hell with him, where you fight this twisted version of Sonic the Hedgehog called Zodic the Hellhog.
No, it's Zonic.
Zodic. Yeah, Zodic the Hellhog.
It's amazing.
Whenever you encounter this boss, it has, I think, the Sega Saturn startup sound. And he has the spin dash like Sonic, and also whenever you hurt him, rings do fall out. But yeah, you poison a child to go to hell to save Sexy Doll, which is just a figure of a woman bent over with a large butt. And like,
and also there's a hell cake too.
Oh yeah, there's in the what is it, the grocery store? Yeah, you meet a hell cake who's, I guess they help you, and so they're not a bad guy. They're just kind of there.
We're really disjointed and going off on a ton of tangents, but that's perfect for what this game is like to play. Yeah,
and so you go through all the different adventures, and you get to the end, and you find out that the person who's running it, Michael Waters or whatever his name is,
Reynolds, yeah.
Reynolds. He's actually Eriko's father, and he basically built this to. Well, so it depends on how you beat the game. So the first time you beat it, you get to the end and you have to choose your final boss, which is really cool and interesting. And the three bosses are like, let me see, I need to look it up. I just know that one of them is called Oh No Man.
Oh yeah, Oh No Man, and then Cash Man and Bullstinger.
Yep.
Right, and so you defeat them, and the game kind of ends, and it's like whatever. But I think it depends. It depends on if you rescued a friend or not. So you either get a bad ending or a good ending. But if you beat it a second time, you have to beat the game a second time and not save anyone. And also, when you play it the second time, Eriko's clothes come off as she gets hurt,
which is weird. That's probably the weirdest thing. That made me feel kind of gross.
Yeah, and then you find out that the mastermind is your father, and they basically talk about how he built this entire place because he used to scare her all the time as a child, which is bizarre, and she stopped getting scared at like 6, so he got distraught and like decided he had to build this entire thing so he could try to scare her. And she's like, I wasn't scared at all. And so he's like, so he becomes this like alien monster thing.
The end boss is kind of like the final boss in Splatterhouse, where it's this giant head, I think, right? It's a giant like purple puddle with a head that's just kind of popping up everywhere.
And then he has a second form of like a brain with tentacles.
Oh yeah.
And so, and you beat him, and then I guess he dies, and Eriko is like, "Oh, you really did scare the heck out of me." And then she just becomes like a shivering like mess, and she's like, and that's the ending.
Yeah.
And then there's it ends with like an invitation to the arcade, which theoretically I guess would have been the sequel or something.
Yeah. The arcade doesn't sound nearly as scary as Illbleed.
Yes.
They ran out of scary names, I guess.
But one thing that I was reading about just now was that if you beat the game in the Japanese version, you actually got a code that you could send in, and it was like the ending challenge, where if you send in after you get the true ending in the Japanese version, you can send in your code, and they'll send you like action figures and jackets and stuff.
Oh, cool! I wish companies did that today. That'd be sweet.
I know. They remember there was like that game for the Atari. There was like 4 different games, and like you could win like a sword and a chalice.
Oh right, it was like one of the most
Adventure?
expensive things.
No, not Adventure. It was Sword Quest Waterworld, Sword Quest Earthworld. Yeah, I guess it was like Air World and stuff. And yeah, each one you could like win a sword, you could win a crown, and it was like worth $25,000.
That's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, Illbleed is weird. Like, especially when you're trying to like determine like its quality or emotional worth, I guess. It's fascinating to play. And you mentioned that it hasn't aged well. JJ, I think you mentioned that.
Yeah, like gameplay mechanics wise, much like something like Sonic Adventure or a lot of early Dreamcast games that weren't like arcade fighters or anything, the mechanics definitely do not hold up very well for like a modern day audience.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I also think that oddly works in this game's favor, because part of it is the campiness. Like, part of the appeal of Illbleed is the campiness and how ridiculous it is and how weird it is. And I think now that more time has passed and people have kind of grown up around video games, that the jankiness of the controls actually plays into the campiness of the game in a strange way, if that makes sense.
I could definitely see something like that, especially like working alongside the idea of just like the whole setting in general is kind of all plastered together sloppily, but but not in a sense of like it's unintentional. There's definitely intent behind the like pasted together this weird, almost like Junji Ito-esque, like absurd theme park, having these also absurd controls that didn't age well over time does kind of work in its favor, especially like the weird helicopter with the ladder coming through ceilings and stuff like that. It doesn't need to explain itself, and it's better off for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I find most interesting is that if you're looking to get the most out of your Illbleed experience, I think part of the joy is actually experiencing a lot of those scares. Because if you diffuse them, you never see what they are.
Right.
And so
right.
there's this weird kind of balance that I think if you really want to appreciate this game, like, screwing up is encouraged, I guess. Like, it's okay to play this in a sloppy way.
Yeah, it actually makes messing up fun in some ways, except for whenever like you're fighting the tremor worms. That's the worst.
I will say that as much as I'm like, well, the jankiness of the controls does add to some of its charm, I think absolutely the weakest part of Illbleed is the combat. Whenever you're forced to fight stuff. Honestly, if this game were updated for today, I would leave everything the same except making that combat a little bit less frustrating and hair-pullingly irritating.
For sure.
So this game was developed by Crazy Games, which they also developed another game called Blue Stinger. Are
Yes.
either of you familiar with that one?
Of course.
Yeah.
That's the origin of Hassie.
Hassie, which is
Yes.
a fictional beverage that everyone wishes was real. I bet it's delicious.
It is delicious. I can tell you that for sure.
You can? Is Hassie a real drink? Is that a thing?
In my mind, in my mind's eye, it is.
Gotcha. I thought you were holding out on me, holding out that sweet Hassie.
We loved it so much that we put it in our game. So
Really?
Yeah.
It's in 2064?
yeah.
That's great.
Oh yeah, Hassie's like a major part of our game.
Yeah, one of the
amazing.
locations is a bar that just serves it.
Yeah, a lot of people ask us like, "Oh, how did you get the rights to use Hassie?" And I was like, "I'm pretty sure. I don't know if anyone has the rights to use Hassie. We just kind of started using it, just because we thought it was just so funny. And, we thought it would be like a cute little homage to those games. It just seemed like such a weird thing. Like, gotta get my Hassie.
Yeah, and it carried over into Illbleed too. I believe Hassie's in Illbleed as well.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Wait, is there an Illbleed 2?
No.
Oh,
as
sorry.
in 2
Yes, I was misunderstanding. I got excited for a second because, my goodness, Illbleed 2 would be amazing.
I saw that someone was working on there was like a fan version of the game.
Of Illbleed, like a remaster, a remake.
Yeah, like an Illbleed 2.
Beautiful
yeah.
Unreal 4.
Yes, someone was making an Illbleed 2 in like 2012, 2013.
Interesting. Because I was reading some reviews when this game first came out back in 2002 or 1, and I think a lot of people at the time didn't have the right mindset for Illbleed. Nowadays, we kind of have this subcategory of games that's populated by stuff like Deadly Premonition or Overblood, and they're these kind of heartful, genuine games that are, despite having like all these cracks and flaws, are genuinely engrossing and interesting. And I think Illbleed kind of falls into that category that I'm not sure really existed, or at least was appreciated back in 2001.
Yeah, I mean, I think
It's not that scary.
I think that for a while, people and games were very, like, you judged a game's quality based on, its graphical, capabilities and its gameplay, and that's really all that mattered. It didn't really matter if it was quirky, it didn't matter what the story was, it just mattered, like, how did it play, and, and what are the graphics look like. And I think that, now that we're starting to get to a point where I feel like where the gameplay is getting so good and kind of almost like standardized, where, we've kind of started to figure out best practices for a lot of genres and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the innovation isn't necessarily vertical in terms of like, yes, nice graphics are great, but we're at a point where the difference is not as big as like going from Super Nintendo to N64, where it's like a completely different world.
Right.
I just that now we're starting to see games that are expanding, in non-vertical ways, like in terms of like you look at a game like like Undertale, right, where it's like it's doing something different in that it's the way that the battle system is very unique, or the way that the the world keeps track of your data and like it logs your mistakes even though you don't realize it and stuff like that. Where I think that's I'm more excited about innovation like that, and I think that Illbleed, at the time when it came out, like people were just looking at it and going, well, the graphics aren't that good, the gameplay is not as good as a Resident Evil type game.
And it's not even that scary.
Yeah. Right. And so I think that they weren't really like ready to go into it with that grindhouse mentality of like, this is a funny, weird, bizarre, game that, like I've never played it. Like I have never played a game where I've laughed and had so much like just genuine fun, like playing it.
It definitely like sticks with you whenever you play it. I mean, again, going by some of the other games that you mentioned, like Overblood and Deadly Premonition, the overall like story and the genuine like love and heart put into it, it resonates much better than like what is it? Something like Resident Evil, Code Veronica, and stuff. There's something more to it. And again, like Matt said, back then, like 1998 to through the early 2000s, there was definitely like a more narrow range of views. Oh, this is a horror game, so of course it's going to be a scary game. I'm going to get this. Wait, what is this game? What am I playing? What is this? It looks like crap. I'm going to throw it away.
Yeah.
And little will they know that they'll miss Oh No Man.
Yeah, they'll miss Oh No Man, who I think is just a... Or yeah. I think, wasn't Oh No Man just a headless guy with a chainsaw and that's it?
He's a headless guy with like 2 scythes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh No Man.
Oh no, but isn't there also, there was Killer Man in that other episode. Level 5.
Yeah, it was a whodunit mystery that actually like interrupts as you get towards the end. Is like, who do you think is the killer?
It was
Oh,
Killer
right.
And you can choose who you think is the killer, and it includes an option for yourself, calling you crazy for having bought and played Illbleed.
Oh man, so good.
And like, that's one of the things. I love how each level of Illbleed, like, the first level establishes kind of the basic horror monitor systems. The other levels all do something different and weird. It's never another straightforward, like, detect the traps level. There's always some unique twist, like there's the tremors, or you become a wooden dummy person and you have to escape from an army full of crazed woodcutters in like a Running Man style competition.
Yeah.
There's like a murder mystery. You have a cursed doll that's running a department store.
You have to play hide and go seek with them.
Yeah, it's crazy, and I love how just off the wall bonkers it's allowed to be. Like that murder mystery level is entirely built around the conceit that you start the level and everything goes wrong, and one of the killer men like activates prematurely and starts killing the people who are working behind the scenes. And so you're going behind the scenes, talking with all these different people and meeting the people who are making this park run, and it's just great.
One of the killer men killed a man.
Yep.
And then the entire time, you got those robot farts.
Yeah, it just sounds like somebody playing a tuba and then like rubbing a bunch of pieces of metal together sometimes, or making some pipes churn.
You're really selling this game.
But
it works somehow. It's weird.
Yeah, I mean, it's like just one of those things where it's like it's so like campy in a good bad way, where like it's like, you know, watching Death Wish or something, and it's just like, man, it's like the music and it's like everything's just like it's like such a trip.
Yeah, I mean, I would rather have the strange music from the game, which the credits music by far is the best. You can hear that in the trailer too. I think it's called Time to Get Ill. But the music where it sounds like pipes are churning or metal scraping together with somebody sloppily playing a tuba in the background, like that's just one of the things that keeps it in your head, really. Like, what the hell was up with this soundtrack? I don't know, but it definitely stayed in my head more than some sweeping orchestral score from some other horror game that just kind of bleeds into the background.
Just something worth noting that I don't really know how to work this in there, but the director of Illbleed, I believe, went on to produce Oni-Chanbara Bikini Samurai Squad for the Xbox 360. At least they're still making weird stuff.
I thought the director died.
Oh yeah, one of the main people died from Crazy Games of a heart attack.
When?
Funny enough. Let's see.
He died in like 2004.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Maybe it's just someone with his exact same name.
Yeah, I know that like that bit pretty much ended the company after that.
That would explain it. That's too bad. I think if Crazy Games were still around today, they would be much more appreciated than they were back in the early 2000s.
Yes, I 100% agree. I think that, I think that we're now in a place where, it took us a while to, understand that games are art kind of thing. And now that we understand that games are art, I think that people would be able to look at it with a more open mind and be like, wow, this game kind of sucks, but it's also kind of amazing. Like Illbleed should be at the very least, like, remembered like The Room. Or, or anything, or something like that, or this is the kind of thing where you could pop this in now, you could pop this in 10, 20 years, it'll still be funny and good for a variety of weird reasons. It's just so bizarre, and it's so unique, and, like The Room, like, the Room is funny and unique because it's like, they just gave this guy the keys to just do whatever, and he just did it. It was very clear that there was no outside forces or like a parent company that's like, well, let's take this out, let's make this better. Like, it's very clear this is the unfiltered vision, and so you get all of the rough with the good, and sort of like deadly, like Deadly Premonition. Like, Deadly Premonition in a lot of ways really sucks. But in the same way, it's also amazing. And it's because Sweary is a very weird and unique guy, and when he can kind of just do what he wants and likes, sometimes, some of it's going to be great, some of it's not going to be so great. Same with, like, Suda. With Suda's games,
yeah.
like, they're not the best games ever made, but that's not the point. You don't play them because they're good games. You play them because of the style and the uniqueness and it's very clearly like his vision, and he's, doing it, and he's not trying to do what's going to sell. He's doing what he thinks is interesting.
So, I looked at the name, and I think, you're talking about Tetsuro Sugimori, who, Onchanbara, Onechanbara, and then, like, I think the most recent thing was Street Fighter Cross Tekken. However, the producer / writer and creator for Blue Stinger and Illbleed was Shinya Nishigaki, and he died at 42 from a heart attack, I believe.
That is unfortunate.
Yeah, but he was basically the one that was responsible for those two really, like, both wacky and almost kind of the same way, but yeah.
Well, that's too bad. But at least he put these out there, because Blue Stinger is also an amazing game.
Yeah, Blue Stinger is also pretty wacky. Not quite as wacky as Illbleed, but that was the spin up leading to all of the off the wall stuff that happens within Illbleed.
It's like, I think it's interesting that you compared it to The Room, Matt, because I have a feeling that Illbleed is much more intentional, like, much more intentionally funny than The Room was, because The Room, from everything I've read, and it's a very hotly debated topic, but it seems to me like The Room was never intended to be a comedy. It just kind of wound up that way, kind of like Troll 2 was made with a straight face, but it is hilarious. Illbleed, I think, was made with winking nods towards the audience. Like, there's a lot of stuff in there that was just kind of like very clearly not scary and intended to be funny.
Well, I think that also part of it is, like, because it's also very Japanese, I think that, like, it also gets kind of, like, some of the humor gets weirdly distorted in the localization, and I think that also makes it funny. Like,
yeah, I wonder how the localization was for this game. I really want to know.
Like, I'm a big fan of the Rikio, and if y'all are familiar with that, right?
Yeah.
I do not know what that is.
Rikio is a very bizarre Japanese movie from the 80s I don't even know how to describe it. It's like the most like, okay, so imagine like Fist of the North Star, right?
Okay.
But it's in real life. I mean, it's like, it's not an animation.
Live action.
Yeah.
It's live action, but like people like just whenever there's a fight, people like he like punches someone and his hand like will like literally the hole through them.
It's all set. It's all set in a prison, and it is the most absurd like body damage and body horror. Whenever you go into different fights, like somebody using a piece of their own intestine to strangle somebody, or
that's awesome.
Fist blowing apart.
Yeah, this guy is like, oh, I can't beat you, so I'm gonna kill myself. And he's like, so he takes out a knife and he like starts cutting himself, like cutting his gut. But then he's like, but I'm gonna take you to hell with me. And then he takes out his intestine and he wraps it around Ricchio's face.
Yeah, I think he like even flings it over like a cowboy to like rope him in.
Yep.
I think as far as like movies go, I feel like if you combine Illbleed and Until Dawn together, then you get oh heck, now I forgot what it was called. Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah.
For the most, Cabin in the Woods is a good medium between those two different games in a movie form. So like play those two games and watch that, and then you have a great Halloween.
Yeah, speaking of that, we got to figure out what Halloween movies we're gonna watch.
Oh yeah, I already started watching horror movies per day now.
Yeah.
Yeah, starting off with two very bland ones.
What'd you start out with?
Dark Water, and a more recent one being Lights Out.
Nice. Okay, so we're kind of getting towards the end of the show. So I want to ask, like, just final statements from both of you. Definitively, do you think that Illbleed deserves to be in video game canon? Like, is this a best game period?
I don't know about literally the best game period, but I think
not the best, but one of the best.
Yeah, actually, I think that if you were to make a list of the top horror games of all time, I would say that it's very much in the top 5. I think that it is bizarre and quirky and fun, and it is legitimately scary at times, and it's hard. Like, once you actually figure out the bizarre gameplay system, managing your adrenaline and your health and, like, trying to figure out when you want to activate traps, and there is sort of a system there where you can kind of, like, figure out, this is probably going to be a trap, or that's probably not going to be a trap. That's a window, so probably something's going to come through it. I think there's a lot of strategy there. And, of all the games I've played, I could say, whether it be like Metal Gear Solid 3 or Virtue's Last Reward, like, there's definitely games that have much better stories and feel like a better complete thought. But Illbleed is probably the most fun I've ever had playing a game.
Right. It's definitely, like, just as far as the content goes itself, it's one of the few games where it feels like you're going through somebody's fever dream for the most part. And I think it's, while not the best game if you look at it purely from like a mechanics standpoint, it is definitely an important game to play if you want to like have more of a variety of flavor within like the horror genre, because it's not all Silent Hill, it's not all Resident Evil or I don't know, Slender Man or anything like that. Like, you got to have some camp in there, and Illbleed has like just the right amount of camp and just the right amount of bizarreness. Like, just play it for Cork Goes to Hell, for God's sake. Like, get a little taste of just the normal, like, haunted house scares, and then dive into Cork Goes to Hell. But honestly, if you want the full experience, you have to get that nice gradient between where the hell is this game taking me? And I feel like it's very memorable if you do that. You
Yeah, I mean,
gotta,
I think that if you want to like, if you're not sold on the game after listening to this, like literally just go to YouTube and like look up the Cork stuff, and like after a few minutes, you'll, I think that you should be able to tell whether or not this is for you.
yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? I have to agree. Like, with a few caveats, because I think that this is the kind of game that benefits from going in more blind than like don't watch an entire playthrough of this and then go in. I would recommend just see if it's for you for like 5-10 minutes and then dive into it yourself if you can find a copy.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean it's yeah, that not saying you should emulate, but it's gonna be very hard to find it if you don't have an emulator.
Right. And the other thing is, I would recommend just play the game blind for the most part. If you get stuck, maybe look up a strategy guide to kind of help you figure out where you need to go, or if you can't find the horror monitor or something like that, use a guide sparingly, I suppose, and just experience what Illbleed has to offer. I think it's a very rewarding game, surprisingly. Like, it's not something I would have expected. But yeah, it's like you were saying, JJ, it fills a very unique gap in the horror genre. We have a lot of stuff right now like Outlast, or more action-oriented Resident Evil, or maybe some more kind of 8-bit horror is becoming a little bit more in vogue with stuff like Lisa.
I feel like the most modern example that's not quite as campy, it's definitely more subdued, but still has like that same kind of heart to it, was sort of the I guess it's a sleeper hit, but Until Dawn kind of had almost the same feeling to it in a way, and the same kind of heart in a way, while not being as off the wall as Illbleed. It's definitely, it kind of like is that midway point where that gap is filled with Illbleed.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, when I was looking up stuff about Illbleed, actually that was something that came up. It was like, there was an article about how Illbleed inspired Until Dawn.
Oh, really? Oh, that's
Really?
pretty cool.
Yeah, I'll send you the article.
That's very interesting, because I wouldn't have thought that Illbleed would have been a big inspiration for a lot of people, but you guys have already said you took at least Hassie from Illbleed, so that's something right there. And then you mentioned another developer taking inspiration from Illbleed. That's great. I firmly believe Illbleed needs to be in more games.
It's a great example of a game that has a lot of heart and personality put into it, and isn't a horror game for the sake of being a horror game.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So we have 3 yeses for Illbleed. I'm sure. I don't know how the polls are going to work out on Illbleed this week. We put the games up for people to vote on Twitter at bestgamesperiod, and also over on Facebook. So if you are interested in either in having your opinion heard, you can vote over at those 2 places. JJ and Matt, where can people find you and your work online?
Well, you can always go to midboss.com to learn about all of our projects, or you can go to GaymerX, GaymerX, learn about GaymerX convention, or if you go to Twitter, you can follow myself. I'm at MattConn, at Matt Conn, or you can follow at ROM2064, or We Are MidBoss, or GaymerX, if you want to know more about the game, or the company, or the convention.
All right.
And you can find me at JJSignal on Twitter.
Awesome. If you guys want to bounce, that's totally fine. I'm just going to wrap up the episode real quick. I don't want to take up any more of your time. Just thank you so much for bearing with me tonight and talking about awesome little horror game from the early turn of the millennium.
Yeah, no, I'm always happy to talk about Illbleed. It's a classic, and hopefully, if just one person plays it after this, then we've done a good job with our lives.
That's true. That will have made this whole living business worthwhile.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Thank you so much to JJ and Matt for coming on to the show and talking with me. If you want to find... Oh, actually, I need to wrap up with polls. Speaking of polls, we have the results from both the Journey poll this week and the ever-lovin' Super Mario RPG poll. Okay, we'll start out with Super Mario RPG because that is the most recent episode. Daniel ran a poll over on Twitter and Facebook, and we had overwhelmingly votes for Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars. Like, it wasn't even close. Literally, we had maybe 10 votes no. And the rest were all yes. Something like 90% of people, over 90% of people voting for Super Mario RPG to be one of the best games, period. So welcome, Super Mario RPG, to video game canon. Welcome to being one of the best games, period. Now, with Journey, surprisingly more people actually voted no for Journey. We ended up about 30% of people voted no. So it was 70-30 in favor of Journey. So Journey is also one of the best games, period. But that might be one of the most surprising poll results, those two games combined. I would have thought for sure that Journey would have been the shoo-in and Super Mario RPG would be much more on the fence. But just an outpouring of support for Super Mario RPG belonging in video game canon. So... hey, RPG developers, take note. In Super Mario RPG, people love that. People love it. A lot. So get on that. Welcome to both Journey and Super Mario RPG to becoming one of the best games, period. It's official. As decreed by both the show and the people. So, with that having been said... it's time to wrap the show up. I'm going to talk a little bit about Extra Life. If you've never heard about Extra Life before, basically it's people from across the United States and Canada getting together to play video games or board games or tabletop RPGs, really any kind of game, to help sick and injured kids in Children's Miracle Network hospitals all across North America. It's really fantastic. And all you really need to do is head over to extra-life.org, and you can learn more about it there. And if you choose to sign up, you can choose which Children's Miracle Network hospital you want to support, and 100% of everything you raise goes directly to that hospital to help sick and injured kids. That's right, 100% of it. Nothing's skimped off the top. Nothing's kind of bamboozled or squirreled away for a CEO or anything like that. All of the money that you donate will go directly to that hospital to help sick and injured kids. So check out Extra Life. And you know what? While you're checking out Extra Life, you can actually head over to the community side of the Extra Life experience, community.extra-life.org. And there you can find this very podcast along with a bunch of other awesome articles and reviews of games. And it's really a great time. You can also connect with people from all across the Extra Life community, maybe people in your own area. Make some new friends, help some kids out, organize. It's really great. So check that out over on community.extra-life.org. You won't regret it, I promise. As for this show, I already mentioned you can find us on community.extra-life.org, but you can also find us over on Game Informer. You can find us on SoundCloud, Libsyn, and iTunes. I think we're also on iHeartRadio and maybe Google Music now. We are on all kinds of things. We're spreading. Our influence is growing. You can find us more places than ever before. And you know what? If you like the show, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes. It actually helps us a lot. Helps us become more visible. And even if you don't have positive things to say, that actually helps us too. So just leave a review. Tell us what you think, and maybe we can improve the show. And it's a win-win-win all around. Better show, more visible, more people listening, more feedback, an awesome cycle. And if you are one of our super fans and you just love listening to this podcast, you can actually support us for $1 a month over on patreon.com/bestgamesperiod. And if you do that, you get access to all of our shows, all of our shows are on Patreon. And you can also listen to exclusive extras that get cut from our episodes just for the sake of time. And you can also listen to full exclusive extras that are just their own little episodes. So we have a couple episodes on video game movies. I think we're calling that series the Best Game Movies period, just to be on brand. And we also have a spoiler cast for the game Rhyme. And I know I've been talking about this for the last couple of weeks, and hopefully it'll be up by the time this episode airs. I just haven't had a lot of time to edit recently. There will be an episode up about the Super Mario Brothers anime. Tied for the first video game movie ever made. And almost no one's heard of it or seen it. So Jeremy and I talk about it, and it is bonkers. So thank you so much for sticking around for that long outro. I appreciate it. And support Extra Life, support our show. With that being said, I'll see you on the flippity dippity.